All right, everybody. Hope you are having a good Sunday morning. Mine's off to a little bit of a rough start, but nevertheless, here we are. Altec Lansing sent me this SoundRover Pro 650. They actually reached out, and it's been a little while now, and asked if I would be interested in reviewing this speaker. And I was like, heck yeah, it just looks cool. It's completely different, and I was just interested in it, playing around with something different for a change. I got to set the stage here that this is not a hi-fi speaker. It is not even remotely marketed as such. It is marketed as a party speaker. So when we're going through the data, just keep that in mind that this is meant to be taken outside to move around. It's got a handle built into it. It's got wheels built into it. It's a big plastic box. It's not at all like that Behringer that I reviewed maybe like a year or so ago, where there was a large contingent of people, relatively large contingent of people who were saying that you should buy this thing for home theater and then equalize it. It was just it's not a good idea. And I know it upset some people, but it is what it is. This is not the same case. So you have been warned. All right. So let's kind of step through some of the information that I have here available for you. So first off, retails for about $249, and that's not repair. That's just for the unit. And this was loaned by the manufacturer. This is just a front picture of it, and you can see the specs over here kind of indicating what's going on with this thing. It's a 650-watt peak power bi-amplified, so it has a big compression driver and a big horn waveguide, and then a 15-inch pro audio grade, at least is what they call it, mid woofer. Now, this thing really doesn't get low at all, but the neat thing about it, and listen, it's gimmicky for sure, is that these over here light up in different LED colors, and then this right here lights up in colors as well. I just think that's kind of neat. And this is another graphic of what all this thing comes with. So it comes with a pole, a microphone, and then you've got the unit itself. Notice that it has a handle on it and some wheels on it. And then if we go and look at the back of it, there's a decent bit of settings here. So you got your master volume, you've got track, skip, forward, pause, etc. You've got SD card input and USB input. And you've got different levels, you've got reverb. So you've got all sorts of microphone and guitar inputs, XLR and TRS. Then down here, you've got mix input and output. You've got auxiliary in, and you've got one, two, three, four, five bands of graphic equalization. And they are centered at different frequencies. It's hard to read this right now, but maybe later on, if you're really interested, you can pull this up on Amazon. It retails there for about $249. So let's go ahead and look at the frequency response. And keep in mind that this SPL is just it's if I feed this thing zero point 0.3 volts input, this is what you would get out. So really don't pay attention to the SPL, but pay attention to the linearity. The speaker is very non-linear. It's got a bit of a bass boost on the low end to give a little bit of punch and some fun to it. It rolls off really quickly on the high end, that being a very narrow radiation profile. So you're going to need to be within a pretty tight spot on this particular speaker. And then, yeah, you've got a pretty big resonance here, got another one here, and a few of them in here. Now, if I set this to smoothing via psychoacoustic smoothing, these wiggles are kind of damped. And I'm not saying they go away, but they're kind of damped. And then you're left with this peak and this high rate of fall off. Now, you can use the EQ built into it if you want to make some changes. And I played around with that, but for the most part, man, I just set this thing up in the backyard. I set it up in the house and I just let it rip. Just I was curious, kind of it just makes sound, right? And again, you're not paying for sound quality. That's not even remotely what this thing is intended to be, and it's not marketed as such. But I still think this data is useful to have. So I'm kind of approaching this review again, as I always do, with a more objective glance at it. But hopefully it gives us enough of an idea of where the limitations of the speaker are and how best to use it. So we'll keep going. This is the CEA 2034 data set, and this is all pretty much the same. The interesting thing, though, is this speaker, aside from these resonances, okay, I'm not trying to say it has great directivity, but if you look up here in the higher frequency area, that's actually really good directivity for a waveguide. So, all things being equal, you could, if you wanted to, go through here and hit the speaker with some EQ and smooth out the response. You could boost up the highs if you want to, at the risk of higher distortion, certainly. And then you can come down here and you can kind of EQ these a little bit, not really that one. and you're going to have trouble EQing these for sure. But you can do some things via EQ with the speaker. So let's say you have something like the mini DSP. For some reason, maybe you want to throw a mini DSP in front of this, or a mixed board that has different EQ knobs and things like that. You could certainly do that if you wanted to. We'll keep going. We'll look at the horizontal contour plot. Now, this gives us an idea of what the radiation is of the speaker. And I said it's kind of about plus or minus 35 degrees, kind of drawing through this lighter red through here. So if you aim the tweeter directly at your head, at the center of your head, so this is what this guy is, top view, you can see that you got about plus or minus 35 degrees to play with. So, if you're trying to cover like a really wide open area, maybe not so much. But if you're trying to cover an area that, again, maybe within about 70 degrees total, you could do that with this speaker if you wanted to. High frequency, where is it best to put your ears at? Certainly on the tweeter axis. I did play around with this speaker, the positioning of it. If I move the microphone or my ears below or above the tweeter line, what did it sound like? Well, below the tweeter line, it started to get a little bit of a dip in that region, the crossover region around like 1 to 3K. Above the tweeter line, kind of the same deal. And as you see in this graphic, you're limited to about maybe plus or minus 35 degrees. And that's kind of negating this, right? So this is a subjective take, certainly. If you wanted to focus on this, then you've got a pretty decent suck out from about 2 to 2.5K, this little ballpark area right here. But for the most part, I'd say you're probably looking at about plus or minus 30 to 35 degrees, give or take. What that means is you don't have to have your head directly on axis with the tweeter, but it's certainly going to help if you do because of that high frequency roll off. Now, the other thing that really matters about a party speaker is the SPL capability. So let's look at distortion. 86 decibels, distortion is under 1%, which is negative 40 decibels down. Well, let's say through the mid range and lower mid bass. Now, when you get to about 50, it starts ramping up pretty quickly. What about 96 decibels? Yeah, we're hitting about 3% through the lower mid-range, mid-bass region in this area. And then above that, you're around again below about 1% or so. The compression driver actually, for the most part, seems like it's doing all right. Now, certainly it's getting higher, but I've seen other compression drivers that do quite a bit worse. So for, all intents and purposes, I think, not too bad. Let's look at multi-tone distortion. So if I blast this thing with actual music or something kind of like pink noise, very complex signal, what's the distortion looking like? Well, it's kind of hitting that 3% threshold right at around about 96 decibels or so. Now you may be thinking, hey, that's actually not too bad, but this is an electronic device. It has DSP built in, which means it has a limiter built in, and it's limited in SPL capability. So if this thing were not using a limiter, you would certainly expect to see this compression, or I'm sorry, this distortion increase quite a bit higher. But as it is, it's manageable. It's really not bad. 3% is kind of my personal threshold. That can change depending on the music content that you're listening to, how trained your ears are, etc. But I tend to find that most people are kind of in this 3% line, and that's why I draw that there. Now, if you use this thing with a high pass filter at about 80 hertz, you don't really change much in terms of distortion. So, no real big win there. What about long term compression? So, if you're listening to music with this long term compression, I'm saying you're maxing out at around 95 decibels. That's why you have the relatively low distortion. I mean, it's not low, but that's why that distortion that we just looked at doesn't get above that 3% line because the SPL capability is maxed out at approximately that same SPL capability or that distortion value around like 95 decibels or so. Now, what if you use a subwoofer and cross this sucker over at 80 hertz? Somehow you've got a mixed channel or something like that, and you feed this guy a different signal and you high pass it. Well, you actually bring down the compression a little bit. So, it's not a lot, but both cases you're around 95 decibels. So this is around like 1 decibel of compression in the mid range. And then this is around 0.75. So I'm just kind of saying 95 decibels. But the main thing is you're limiting or lowering, I should say, it's probably the better word, you're lowering the compression on the low end. Obviously, when you use a subwoofer and cross this over at 80 hertz, you're getting nothing down here, but it also cleans up the lower mid range. All in all, about 95 decibels or so max SPL capability for music. Now, if you just hit this thing with sine sweeps, you're kind of looking at the same deal where below about 80 hertz, the compression just ramps up. And this is actually distortion through enhancement. And then if we go a little bit higher in frequency, you're kind of looking at 3 decibels. Well, maybe about 1 decibel. I probably should update this guy. Missed him. Uh, for quick transients. So maybe around 100 decibels or so for quick transients. And that's it. That's kind of the gist of it. If you want to know how does it sound? I mean, it sounds like a party speaker, guys. It's neat. It has all sorts of inputs and things like that. Would I ever use it in a home to try to make a sound quality setup with it? No, absolutely not. And I can't imagine that anybody really would. But if you're looking for something to make some noise, maybe a pool party or hanging outside with friends or a shop speaker or something like that, it's got the microphone input, so you can do karaoke with it if you want to. The kids dig it. My 14-year-old daughter thinks it's cool that it lights up in LEDs. So, and personally, I do too. So if you're looking for something like that, now you have some objective data to kind of get a better understanding of the actual performance limitations of the speaker side of things. And, I think it's cool. If you needed something like it, hey, go ahead, knock yourself out. How does it compare to other ones? I have no idea. This is literally the first speaker like this that I have tested or reviewed. And if you're curious how other ones like this do, feel free to reach out. I might be willing to review it, but honestly, this is very, very niche thing. I'd be really surprised if this video that I'm creating right now gets more than maybe 1,000 or 2,000 reviews. But I still think it's cool, and I wanted to bring something different to you all. And if you like this kind of information or content about these kind of speakers, let me know, and maybe I'll consider doing future ones again. So I'm going to look at a couple of the comments and see if there's anything out here that I need to pay attention to, any super chats or anything, and then I'll probably head on out. Just let this video end up a little bit early. Hey, Erin, just a heads up. I'm Gaster. Glad that I managed to get your attention back on these. Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that. I've had these for a while and been needing to get these done. Or get this review done. Uh, so, yeah, Altec Lansing, it would be really cool if they could somehow go back to their theater roots. That would be really neat. I think that'd be kind of cool. Yeah, so a couple of you are commenting on the high frequency directivity. Yeah, I mean, it does look good. Kind of makes one think, hey, could you cannibalize this thing? But it's such a boost on the top end that if you wanted to do that, then you'd have to have a pretty aggressive crossover. I mean, I don't know what that crossover will look like. You could probably say cross it at 10,000 hertz with a 12 decibel per octave slope or a 6 decibel per octave slope, and you probably could actually maybe even not flatten it out, but smooth it out some too, and then pair it to a big old 15-inch. Make sure that it's narrowing. You get that 15-inch narrowing up at above like 800. Well, probably higher than that or lower than that, like 500 hertz. Beaming point probably closer to like 300 or 400 hertz. But yeah, if you really wanted to play around and be a goofball, knock yourself out. It'd be interesting to see that. So anyway, I'm going to end the review there. I appreciate you all jumping into the chat. I got a couple pretty funny comments. Yeah, after 2 6 packs, they will sound okay. Yeah, maybe about right. But like I said, this is just a fun speaker to play around with. It's got the wheels, it's got the roller, it's got the stand. You can set it up, do all sorts of different fun stuff with it. If you're looking for a literal party speaker and this fits your budget at about 250 bucks, give it a shot. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I'm going to end it here. I will talk to y'all later. Thanks for watching. Peace.